Hi, this is International Psychic Medium Susan Schueler. Welcome to my show, Midlife Conversations. Today on our show is high school English teacher Jamie Snyder. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Susan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Now, Jamie currently works in LA Unified, but I met Jamie years ago when she was teaching, as I was teaching, at Culver City High School. Jamie was actually across the hall from me, I think, your first year. And I have to say this, you were truly a breath of fresh air when you came into our school. I think the kids loved you. I think the staff loved you. Parents loved you. It's just so clear to me what you do that you genuinely like what you do and you like kids, which
I
I think is
do.
huge. So I have to ask you, how did you get into teaching?
Um, because I dislike math. It's a weird story. I
With you on that one.
I know. I love sports, and I grew up thinking I want a job in the sports industry. I don't care what I do. So I went to college to become a sports writer, a communications major, and then my counselor laid on me, you have to take statistics. And I thought, okay, what major do I have now where I don't have to take a math class? They were like, oh, education. And I thought I could be a teacher. I could read, I can write. So I changed my major, and little did I know I still had to take statistics,
Oh,
education
funny.
statistics. Yeah. But I fell in love with it. I think everything happens for a reason, and there's a reason why I found my way into teaching.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I'm always surprised how many of us got into teaching and loved it, but didn't intend to necessarily go that route. So
Right.
let me ask you this. Teaching during the times of a pandemic. Okay. Honestly, I've said this to all my friends. I'm like, if I hadn't gotten out of teaching in 2015, I'm like, I would have gotten out of it before all of it. I just couldn't have done it. God bless you.
Right.
So I have to ask you, how has this changed during a pandemic? And could you just kind of give us like a day, a typical day for you?
Yeah. First of all, teaching during a pandemic is no joke. We are all remote, so we're teaching through a computer screen, which is so difficult in and of itself. It's interesting because previously I liked to have my home life and my work life separate. I leave work at work, I leave home at home. But now that I'm working from home, I get visitors. My children come in often unannounced to say hi. My students love it. I have an obnoxious cat that comes to talk to the kids too. It's we make it work with all of these interruptions. They'll hear the doorbell ring, the neighbors. We just have to make it work.
Right.
It's I feel like I spend so much more time now lesson planning to make sure that the kids are getting what I'm trying to teach. It's so hard to teach, nuance and facial gestures and body movements that the kids would normally pick up on in class. They just don't get now. So I really have to I have to put intent, lots of intent into my lessons to make sure that the kids are getting what I need them to from them. I spend a lot of time grading papers and giving feedback more so than I would in person, because in person it's verbal, it's quick, great job, do more of this, do less of this. But now it has to be very specific and detailed so that the kids get it.
How big are
It's
like your classes and stuff?
My largest class is 29 kids, so it's
Oh, okay.
really
That's not too
manageable.
bad.
I love it. It's so manageable. The kids are great. I mean, for what it's worth, these kids are really trying.
And so do you have like, is it the same way it was when we were, when I was teaching, where it's like you have 5 classes, they're kind of back to back, you break for
Yeah.
lunch?
Yeah. Well, we're doing a block schedule, so each class is 70 minutes. So I have 3 classes a day, and we alternate days. So I get to see all the kids 3 times a week.
Okay, so let me just clarify here. So you're telling me kids are sitting in a Zoom situation for 70 minutes, and do they get a break in between?
5 minutes to bounce from one Zoom to another. I know. I know.
Oh my God, I would lose. I mean, I would have a hard time as a grown up
Yeah, it's very
doing
difficult.
that.
I like to work in a lot of asynchronous time where I give them an assignment and I tell them you have 15 minutes if you need to get up and make a lap around the house, use the restroom, get a drink, and then come back. So I like
Right.
to build in breaks where they can work and do what they need to do, because I
Do you
have to.
use do you use breakout rooms where they're able to work in small groups, or is it just you and like them
I
interacting?
do. I like to use the breakout rooms. But what I've noticed is when I bounce from breakout room to breakout room, they're not talking. It's not the same as in-person group work. They rarely have cameras on. They rarely have microphones on. So it's just black screens.
Oh
So
my God.
they're missing out on that socialization aspect of working in groups with their peers.
Oh my God.
It's a struggle. It's really hard. And
So
we know, you as a former teacher, you know that kids learn best from other kids. And
absolutely.
I can't, pair them up and, you guys go work on this and you guys go work on that. It's difficult.
Wow. So how are kids coping with all of this? I mean, do they have, I'm sure they reach out to you individually to tell you what's kind of going on.
They do. And I just had a conversation with one of our counselors this morning. We're seeing more instances of Zoom fatigue where the kids are just done sitting in front of a computer. They're exhausted. I've had several emails from parents, kids are getting migraines and they're not
Oh,
sleeping as well. And so we have to figure out how to get these kids engaged and involved, but not burn them out.
right.
um, they're struggling. The kids are struggling, depression, and they're a lot of these kids are missing out on pivotal points of high school dances and graduations and proms and parties, and it's heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking.
Gosh, I was a super social kid in high school. I was definitely one of those kids who went to school for the social aspect, not the
Right,
academic aspect.
right.
So the idea of like missing out on junior prom, senior prom,
Mm,
homecoming, any of that sort of stuff would have crushed me
yeah.
beyond compare. And then it's like, how do these kids like, how are they even dealing with like counseling and knowing how to like apply to colleges because they don't have the counseling?
We have two advisory periods every morning, and they're half an hour each. I have seniors, so I have the big job of informing them about everything,
Oh
the
my
FAFSA and applications. But thankfully we have a beautiful counseling staff at our school. They
And what
make
school
by
are you at in LA Unified?
at Taft Charter High School in Woodland Hills.
Okay.
They make videos for us to show an advisory that explains everything for the kids. You go to this website and you put this in. We have two counselors, and 2 times a week. They call it the Mary and Veronica Show, where they offer social emotional learning and meditation. And I love those days. Tuesdays and Thursdays are our mornings where we start out with a meditation, and we
Oh,
look inward, and it's beautiful. Not only for the kids, but for myself. It's a great way to start my
right.
day, and a lot of the things resonate with me even as an adult working.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Now, when you look at your workload, okay, and you've always been a big prepper. I know that because I've seen
Yeah.
you work. How has this affected you in respect to that? Because I've heard, and we'll get into this in another question. Um, there are some people who are like, oh, those teachers, they're just having a vacation these days. And I'm like, it is nothing like that.
It is nothing like a vacation. I work a minimum on a good day, 10 hours at least. I start my days earlier than I probably would. I like to come to my office downstairs, have a minute of quiet, drink my coffee, check my emails, respond to my kids, make sure that my lessons are planned. I'm ready to go. I set my intentions for the day, and then we dive in and we take off running. And I'm running till 4 or 5 at night. And then I'm able to take a break and work with hang out with my kids, help my son with his homework, make dinner, the bedtime routines, and then it just starts all over
And
the next
that's the
day.
challenging part too. How old are your children?
7 and 4.
Yeah, so you've got your own kids who have their own studies going on as well. So you're
Yes,
trying to juggle that as a parent.
yes, yes. So while I'm downstairs teaching, my 7-year-old is upstairs doing his, remote learning, and then my 4-year-old is with my husband or the babysitter.
Oh my
So it's
gosh.
it's just a three-ring circus, literally, in
Oh
this
my
house.
gosh. Yeah. It to me, it's like, and because of the work I do, I'm talking with people in their homes and
Mhm.
it's like, there's no privacy. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's like all bets are off. So I'm even surprised, like how you can find like a private place. Like you said,
Right.
sometimes your kids come in. I'm like, that's got to
Yeah.
just be the way of it for most
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And it's now that we're almost a year into it, it's normal. My
Right.
kids know, my students know that my children may run in at any moment, and I have a very needy cat, and she'll jump and talk to them. And it's it while it's difficult sometimes, it kind of offers that relief as well. Like, okay, let's just take a moment, and life happens. Let's laugh
Right.
through this, let's breathe through this, and then let's move on. So
Right. So you're saying the kids don't have to put their cameras on. That's by law, isn't it?
Yeah, they've mandated that they don't need to. I actually support that.
Yeah, of
It's
course, of
I
course.
don't want to be invited into their homes, that's their
Absolutely.
privacy. So,
Absolutely. So you're going to say a majority of the kids don't put the camera on. Yeah.
mm-mm, no.
Yeah. And I kind of get that. So how do you know that they're actually engaging?
I try to engage each student, talk to each student at least once throughout the class period. I'll call on them, hey, what do you think about this? Or how was your morning? What did you have for breakfast? Anything that I can do to make that connection with them as
Right.
soon as class starts. So I know that they're there, they're engaged, I've got their buy-in. It's
Right.
hard, it's difficult.
I have such respect for all of you right now, just because I know how hard everybody's working,
Yeah.
which leads us to the next question. Um, Now, I know in Los Angeles, there's talk of school starting. Now, they're not talking about this year, are they?
Yeah.
They are. Okay.
Yes.
So they're talking about going back this year, clearly not full time. I'm sure they're going to space it kind of like what you're saying. What are your views on that? How do you feel it's best approached? Because you are kind of behind the lines. You're a good
Yeah.
person to ask.
Um, I'm very wary of going back to school during this school year. I understand where parents are coming from. It's been a year. I think that kids do need to be in the classroom. They need to be with their peers and learning and running around at recess and having fun. And I want to be in the classroom. I want to see my high school kids, cross the stage of graduation, and I want to see them start their lives. But I think we need to be vaccinated first. I really honestly do. I think a lot of precautions need to be put in place. A lot of steps need to be taken before we can safely return.
Now,
Um,
is there any talk of, like, first of all, is it going to be mandated that as teachers in LA Unified that you have to get vaccinated?
no,
No.
no, no
Is it
mandate.
mandated that the kids will have to be vaccinated?
So far, no. That's what
No.
I.
Okay.
But I
So,
mean, knowing our district, it can change day to day. So
okay. So will they make it available so everybody can if they want to?
yes,
Yes. Okay.
we're hoping they're setting up testing, or I'm sorry, vaccination sites. I heard one is at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, and then one at Hollywood Park for LAUSD teachers and staff.
Okay. Now, have they talked about, because this is the part that would kind of blow me out of the water. It's like, okay, well, let's just say, I know they've got to put some kind of plan in place.
Mhm.
Let's just say somebody comes down with COVID. Have they talked about what they intend to? They haven't talked about that.
I haven't heard anything about that yet.
Gosh, I can't even imagine. And especially like where you're concerned, it's like, okay, they would also still be doing some remote learning, correct?
Right, like the hybrid model. Yes.
So now with this hybrid model, it almost seems like that would mean more work. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're correct.
Okay, because now you've got to plan lessons in person that I'm sure are going to be very different than the lessons that you have to plan remotely.
And they still have to, be cohesive and flow together. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then what would they do? Would the kids still do like the block, like what you're saying, the 70-minute periods in person?
I have no idea how
They
that's
haven't
going to
talked
look.
about that.
No, we haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
I know recently we did vote on a schedule that we all liked, but I haven't heard anything if it's been finalized yet.
And then how do you now? Do your kids go to LA Unified?
Yes.
Okay. So then how would you feel? To me, this is the part that would scare me. It's like, okay, now I'm going out. Now my children are going out, and your husband's still working from home.
No, he's actually going into work at Fox.
Okay. Okay. So everybody's
Yes.
out and about now.
Hmm.
That's kind of scary.
Very scary. I I'm very worried about sending my children to school. My daughter was in the PICU at the beginning of last year, which we think was COVID, was very scary respiratory problem that she had 2 surgeries on. And so I'm very scared of either sending her out or possibly bringing something home with me, bringing it
Yeah.
into my home. So
Now, do you feel like you're getting support from your system? Are
oh
the
yes,
parents
my
cool
school,
about
my
it? Are those like, how's it?
for the most part, yes, I have wonderful parents, supportive parents. I reach out to them all the time. We email all the time. I like to keep my parents up to date. What's going on in my class, and how your student is performing. And so far, they've been wonderfully supportive.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming most of your kids' parents are working remotely from home as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's really hard for them to monitor what the kids are doing and if they're logging in for class and doing
Wow.
homework.
Now, have they mandated? I was talking to a neighbor of mine who teaches, I think, in LA Unified, and he said last year they were not allowed to give any Fs.
Right.
Okay. Now, did that change this year?
We were told at the beginning of the year that grades do matter and that
Okay.
we need to, express that to the kids. You got to work hard because grades do matter. But towards the end of first semester, LAUSD stepped in and told us that if kids fail, we have to give them an incomplete and then let them make up the work or
Right.
provide an optional computer-based program so that they can bring that incomplete up to a D.
Right. Do
Yeah,
you notice how many years have you been teaching, Jamie?
16.
Okay. So in your 16 years, do you notice that the students are academically doing poorly or at this time than they had in the past, or is it just sort of like across the board the same?
I've noticed there's a stark difference between the kids that are really pushing themselves to do well and learn, and then there are kids that are very apathetic and they just don't care.
Yeah.
Previously, in the previous years, I've always had that like bell curve, of the super high achievers, the super low kids, and then the kids right in the middle. But I just don't have any that are just in
Yeah.
the middle. It's either end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, I just think to myself how I would feel as a kid, and I'd be like, oh my God, I would totally shut down.
Yeah.
Now, this kind of has us switch gears a little bit. Now, and you and I used to talk about this when we taught together, but you're an empath and an intuitive as well. And as you brought up several times when we would be talking about it at school, people like us tend to gravitate towards homes where there are certain strange phenomenon at
Yeah.
best. And I
Yeah.
know there were times that you've asked me about to look at your home here, look at your home here, and you've had several different homes over the last couple of years. So, would you just tell our audience a little bit about some of the interesting phenomenon that has happened to you in your various homes across the years?
Okay. Growing up, I've always felt presence of people or things. I don't know. I've heard voices, people talking to me, clear as day. Especially when I was emotional or upset as a child. Clear as day. You'll be fine. Don't cry. It's okay. Things like very comforting voices. And I never really told anybody because I thought I'm a crazy kid. I'm crazy. But growing up and finally accepting that maybe I'm not crazy, maybe it is an ability or something that's there, um, I've been more open to accepting phenomena around my home. So the first home we bought was an older home, and we moved in when my son was 3. And the first night we slept in that home, my son said, "We have to say goodnight to Bobby." And I'm thinking, we don't know a Bobby. Who is Bobby? And he said, "The man in the closet."
Oh my God.
And so, of course, I'm just terrified. Oh my God, what? And I'm searching through the closet. There's nothing in there. And my son, "Don't worry, mommy, he's nice." So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's an imaginary friend that my son has. But
Right.
over time, Bobby has shown himself. I can see him walking my hallways, peeking around corners. Not a scary presence at all. He was very friendly, almost protective. I saw him a lot when my husband wasn't home. And then we had my daughter, and one night I was consoling her and like patting her back in her crib, and her rocking chair began to rock. And then I got
Now, this
really
was all
dizzy.
in
I
the
remember
same house, correct?
all in the same house,
Okay.
and I got super dizzy. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to pass out, and it took a while for me to recover. And I remember immediately messaging you about this, and you were like, maybe they were trying to blend. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. What's going on? Before I could fully accept, that I can sense these things. It was a little scary. We've moved to Denver, and there was a lovely older woman that lived in there, and she was attached to the couple before us, and she liked to play with the light switches in our basement. And
Oh.
my dad would come visit, and she would play with the switches in the bathroom, and my dad would lose it.
Oh my God. So he just freaked him out.
Yeah, freaked him out. And I'm like,
Okay.
don't worry, she's fine. She's nice. Don't pay any attention to her. And now we just recently moved back home to Los Angeles and purchased a new home in Chatsworth. And it's a little heavy. The atmosphere in this home is a little heavy. I've seen a few shadows, I guess. Very not friendly, very menacing upstairs towards our bedrooms.
Now, have you been able to clear them out
Yes,
or? Okay.
yes. So I set up a grid around the home with tourmaline and selenite, and I cleanse those and I set my intentions. And I've even gone as far as locking my mirrors because you can't be too safe. But yeah, I've been able to clear it out.
Yeah, well, that's awesome because to me, I'm always of the firm belief, and this is just kind of the way I operate it. Unless you're here as one of my loved ones, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It's
Exactly.
just sort of like send them on their way.
Yes.
But I know as a teacher, as an
Mhm.
empath and an intuitive as well, there were certain good parts of being like this when it came to dealing as a teacher with
Mhm.
parents and kids. And then there were certain bad parts to it. My favorite good part was I usually nipped everything in the bud when it came to parents. I never had parent conferences. So that was
Mhm.
like a good thing for me. So, how has, like, what have been some of the good things or some of the hindrances that being an empath or an intuitive has kind of played into you being a teacher?
My favorite part of being an empath and being a teacher is the connection I can make with the kids on a whole different level.
Yeah.
I can walk into my classroom and immediately pick up on the vibe, and I can feel who's having a really bad day or who's having a wonderful day. And I really think that dictates how I run my class that day.
Mhm.
How I teach a lesson, depends on the vibe that I'm getting from the kids. I've also noticed too, the kids come to me a lot with problems or questions, or I was the teacher that they just came to sit in the room because it was quiet, and they could talk to me and tell me secrets that nobody else knew. And I really was very proud knowing that I was that teacher for those kids.
Mhm.
And because of that, I've made a lot of lifelong connections with former students. Our babysitter is a former student from Culver, and
Oh, I love that.
I talk to former students on the phone all the time. They call, they email, they text, they write. I have a few godchildren now from students, so that's been a plus. Negatively, and I think I'm still working on how to strengthen myself as an empath. When kids aren't feeling their best, I tend to soak it up like a sponge and I carry it with me.
Mhm.
There were plenty of days where I would drive home from work just crying, sobbing, because I didn't know how to separate myself from the students and myself. Parents, I still have a hard time saying no to parents because I feel their anger or their emotion or their concern. And it's really hard for me to kind of separate myself from that.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, that's just the life of an empath
Yeah.
overall, yeah. So, sort of in closing,
Mhm.
if you could impart parents or students with any pearls of wisdom during our little pandemic here, or our huge pandemic, it's not little, who am I kidding? What would you want parents and your students to know?
I just want them to know to give themselves grace. If you are a student in this pandemic, give yourself grace.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And adults, we understand it's not going to be easy for you. Your world has been turned upside down. We get it. And parents, give yourself grace. You're trying to hold it all together, working and raising your children. And it's not an easy job even without a pandemic. So in the middle of a pandemic, you're killing it. You guys are doing a great job. And give the teachers grace because we're humans too, and we're really trying our best, and we can't wait to get back into person and see you.
Yeah, and that's so true. It's like it's teaching is such a beautiful thing, but it truly is one of those things where you do need the human interaction.
Absolutely.
We do need
Absolutely.
that. Well, Jamie, I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. You were lovely. I'd
Thank
like
you
to
for having
thank
me.
all of our viewers and our listeners. And I would like to leave you with this. While our stories are unique, our collective experiences are what unite us. So I'd like to just say, remember, we are all one. And thank you for being here. And thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
This has been Midlife Conversations with psychic medium Susan Schueler. Thanks for joining us. Do you have a story to tell? A conversation of sorts? A midlife conversation? Feel free to check out my website at mediumsusan.com and click on Midlife Conversations. Until then, to paraphrase Carl Jung, if we have nothing else to create, then perhaps we create ourselves.